Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah. Let me share my, I'll take over presenting. Okay,
You're good, brother. I
perfect.
stopped sharing.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. 1 second. Okay, here we are. Okay. Present. Okay, you guys can see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so the subject matter of the day, inshallah, will be regarding the Islamization of knowledge. It's a very interesting theory that arose on the latter half of the 20th century. There's different ideologues throughout the course of theorizing and understanding what is Islamization, what constitutes Islamization. But one of the main ideologues is Ismail al-Faruqi, especially in the American context. And there's also others such as Sayyid Muhammad Naqib al-Atlas in Malaysia. Inshallah, we'll have some time to maybe discuss him in a little bit, inshallah. So we'll just briefly discuss his origins, his development intellectually, Ismail al-Faruqi's development intellectually, and then get deeper into the crux of the theory and see how it can be applied, or its applications in the academy as well as in society, inshallah. A legal scholar, as well as a qadi, or a judge. So he had an early exposure to a wide array of Islamic thought and tradition. He was exposed to a lot. But interestingly enough, I'll add this little caveat that earlier in his days, in his early years, he kind of saw he was much more of an Arabist. He was really involved in national Arabism, or Arab naturalism, I should say. So he really was more proud of his race and his ethnic background than he was his faith. He's quoted to have said that I saw myself as a Palestinian, then an Arab, then a Muslim. So it's interesting to kind of see his transition over the years as he progressed throughout his life, and how he came to be someone who was really steeped and rooted in the practice and the tradition of Islam, so much so that he theorized about this idea of the Islamization of knowledge. But he was very talented, very smart from a very young age. He was destined to be working in intellectual capacity. So he began his academic career at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. And then he continued on receiving 2 master's degrees from the University of Indiana and Harvard, where he both studied in both universities. He studied philosophy. His master's thesis was the ethics of reason and the ethics of life. So he was comparing Kantian and Nietzschean ethics. So you can kind of see earlier on in his academic career, he wasn't really deeply focused in Islamic studies or the Islamic sciences, so on and so forth. He was using his intellectual capacity in more philosophical disciplines, in the humanities and the social sciences, things of that nature. And he completed his PhD from the University of Indiana. But over the years after he graduated from university, he realized, not after, but throughout his studies in the university, he realized his kind of severance with a deeper understanding of traditional scholarship. So for a brief period of time, for 4 years, he studied in Azhar. He deepened his intellectual understanding of Islamization tradition, studying traditional texts through the Arabic language, having the close connection with traditional scholarship, had a really huge impact on him, leaving whenever he began his academic career. As soon as he got to Azhar, he was funneled into the academy. He was offered positions by many of his colleagues and contemporaries. He began teaching in Canada at McGill University for 3 years. And he joined the Institute of Islamic Studies. And then he was invited to Pakistan by Fazlur Rahman, the modern scholar. He was invited there to teach for a few years, for almost 2 years, until 1963. And then he returned to the United States the following year in '64 and taught at a multitude of different institutions. He was a visiting scholar and adjunct professor in different universities for a period of time. But then he was appointed to the professor of Islamic Studies and founded the Islamic Studies program at Temple University. So he stayed there up until his death in 1986, where he was tragically murdered in his own home. His wife and him were murdered in their own home a few years after that, unfortunately. So getting into the main crux of the topic today, the Islamization of knowledge. This came about throughout the course of him spending time in different contexts. For example, he was teaching Islamic studies in Canada, as well as in the third world of the global south, one might say, in Pakistan. And then he came back to Temple University in Philadelphia, or in Pennsylvania. And throughout his time there, he had a deeper understanding and connection with different groups of people, as well as different academics who were Muslim, but their understanding and their depth of connection with the Islamic tradition wasn't as strong as someone who claims to be an expert, or someone who is a Muslim and an academic at the same time should be, right? So he theorized and he thought about establishing an institution, which still stands to this day, that we'll talk about in a little bit. But he theorized about establishing an institution that that can kind of remedy the intellectual decay of Muslim scholarship, specifically from the standpoint of understanding the Islamic tradition, right? In one of his, in his main book, where he theorizes about the Islamization of knowledge, the methods, and the institution of the International Institute of Islamic Thought. He spends a lot of time venting about the onslaught of Western forms of thinking, Western forms of inquiry, Western forms of understanding the world around us, and that kind of severs us from our connection to God, right? Especially if you're someone who's steeped in academia, it can be an ossifying process, if you will. So he proposed Islamic forms of understanding, inquiry, and presentation of the various academic disciplines, from the natural sciences, be it biology, chemistry, physics, as well as the social sciences. So your economics, your sociology, your psychology, political sciences, and so on and so forth. So he proposed understanding and inquiry from a traditional Islamic framework. And he said in his text, the great task facing Muslim intellectuals, this is the great task facing Muslim intellectuals, to recast a whole legacy of human knowledge from the viewpoint of Islam. The content is the object of study. The content is the object of study of the various disciplines. To recast this knowledge in the mode of Islam relates to the Islamic vision, and to reproject the goals, and to do so in such a way as to make the disciplines enrich the vision and serve the cause of Islam. So his goal was to be able to understand and digest the various disciplines, be they natural sciences or social sciences, and to recast them from a purely Islamic framework and point of view, to be able to serve the cause of Islam and the goals that Islam has for civilization and humanity. Okay, so going deeper into his methodology, what is his methodological approach to inquiry, to empiricism, and understanding the world around him? So in his book, in his main book where he theorizes about this, he initiates the process of empiricism and epistemology. First and foremost, it's one that is grounded upon the understanding of the oneness of God, right? Separate from other ideals, other visions, other ways of approaching the world. And he says that this understanding of the oneness of God purifies Islamic knowledge from the pitfalls of sophistry, meaning like getting too deep into, kind of like eccentric words and things like that. So it saves us from the pitfalls of sophistry and hyper intellectualism and alien metaphysical concepts that corrupted Islamic methodology of thought and education. So this is the first staple, the understanding the oneness of God, right? And by extension, he continues, Faruqi says that the next epistemological principle is the unity of God's creation, right? And he says that the cosmic order of the world, its creatures, and the responsibility that man holds in it. All things in creation serve a purpose, and all purposes are interrelated as a means and an end to one another. This makes the world one telic system, vibrant and alive, full of meaning. So in this approach, this is much more broad, and this is just really trying to establish a way of thinking, an approach of thinking for the Muslim mind, right? He talks about it later on that this effort shouldn't be only solely for the sake of the intellectuals of the Muslim community, but also giving a strong foundation of understanding the world and the process of educating your children and family members and things of that nature from an approach that's firmly based upon a methodology and an epistemological approach that is firm in the understanding of who God is and his relationship to his creation. Then he discusses the unity of truth and knowledge in various forms. So this is dissecting whenever we understand or we dive deeper into a certain discipline or we reach a certain understanding about any type of discipline, there is a unity of truth, and that truth meaning it comes back to a similar origin, being God, right? So he says, once the question of the first or ultimate principles, which are found in revelation, are settled, then reason acquires a new vigor, which with it can overcome the problems confronting it. So he's saying that the first and ultimate principle is found in revelation, right, which we've talked about before. That fundamental principle is to worship God, right, and to keep to focus all your energy and your desires and your passions towards pleasing God, right? So he says that once this principle is settled, then reason, right, our ability to reason and use our minds acquires a new vigor, right, and a new type of energy, which with it can overcome the problems confronting it, right? Its basic presuppositions must all be probably certain. He continues on by saying, where reason does not enjoy probable certainty, the light of faith can provide this certainty and even cast illuminating light on all other presuppositions, right? So just building upon our reason alone, it does not give that sense of certainty in what we're in what we engage in, from an academic context or even like an interpersonal context, right? Or in the way that we engage with the world around us, right? That reason, building upon reason, reason alone does not enjoy that certainty of that comes through understanding and digesting revelation. So he says that the light of faith can provide this certainty and even cast illuminating light on all other presuppositions, thereby supporting with additional certainty the whole worldview built upon them. He continues on by saying knowledge attained through empirical speculation and observation is also not in opposition to that which is revealed. So that which we understand and which we digest from our own, speculation, observation, and study and research, it can never oppose. It can never be in opposition to the revealed knowledge, right? That knowledge has come from God. And he says that if our understanding of knowledge through speculation and observation is in contradiction to that which is revealed, that means that our approach to understanding something was wrong. Either that, or we need to dive deeper into the meanings, into the inner truths of revelation. And then he continues on, going through different epistemological foundations. I kind of brought it all together in one in this slide, the last few. He speaks about the unity of life, the unity of humanity, and the complementary relationship between wahi, revelation, and aql, which is reason, which we have spoken about earlier. So that unity of life, he talks about the divine trust, right, emphasizing the role that mankind plays in protecting the natural world and providing benefit to it, to all forms of existence, while also receiving benefit from it as well, right? So that's where that unity of life comes into play, where everything that has been created has a role to play, and it's not necessarily that we're fragmented, but we're all one physical system in a way, where we take and we give and we benefit, just how we give oxygen, or the trees give oxygen for us to breathe, we give CO2 for them to produce food, right? There's a unity in that existence, and that unity goes back to the unity of everything being from God, right? And then he speaks about the unity of humanity as well, right? He spends some time talking about the rise of nationalism and nationalistic pursuits, and how that has fragmented the global community, and how that fragmentation has been exploited by colonial powers as well as intellectuals, right? Who have kind of in a way colonized our sources of knowledge by severing us from a collective language, right, and script, right? When we think about how Turkey's script was changed from the Arabic script to Latin, right? And how a lot of countries in West Africa were severed from the Arabic language and imposed, French was imposed upon them, as well as also in North Africa, right? So these pursuits of nationalism, right, have stripped us of our ability to operate as one global community, right? And this is something that he speaks about in his work as well. Okay, so in here we're dive deeper into the academic ideals of the Islamization of knowledge. And I'll kind of go through them one by one. This is more so in regards to his theorizing of the institution of the International Institution of Islamic Thought, which is still operating in Washington, D.C. to this day. It was founded upon a generous donation from, I believe, one of the Gulf states, one of the leaders of the Gulf states. He donated a couple $100 million, maybe even up to $1 billion, to establish an institution, to build this institution, to fund research, and to provide stipends for researchers, academics who are Muslim, who can have a stronger, deeper connection with in tying the tradition of Islamic thought and Islamic epistemology to whatever specific discipline they may find themselves to be in. So the theorizing of the institution of the Islamization of knowledge, ultimately translated to the establishment of the IIIT, which is funded by a generous endowment. And the approach of the Islamization of knowledge in regards to its institution, it has kind of it has a list of ideals in its text. It says one of the ideals is to create awareness in the ummah of the crisis of ideas, right? The fact that we are losing the battle, so to speak, of ideas, of knowledge, of producing knowledge, of knowledge production, right? I believe it's the top three places, or the top three countries that produce the most knowledge, who have the most kind of footprint, if you will, in the academic journals, are Great Britain, the United States, and France to this day still. So what he's saying here is it's still relevant to this day when he says that the ummah is in a crisis of ideas, right? We're not producing ideas, and that can be also attributed to things such as phenomena such as brain drain, where the most intellectual or the most gifted of the Muslim nations, they migrate to Western countries to seek out opportunities in more prestigious universities, and right. We're still in this crisis, right? And he says that this involves enlightening the ummah about the place and methodology of the crisis of Islamic thought in the perspective of its cultural and civilizational existence. So the first thing is to create this awareness, put it up to the people, to bring it up to academics and scholars. And then he says we need to foster deeper understanding of the nature of the crisis of ideas in contemporary Islamic thought, its causes and its solutions. And then he says we need to define the critical relationship between the failure of Islamic thought and its methodology, the current absence of the ummah as a civilization, and its failure to succeed as a free, progressive, and prosperous nation, right? So he then followed on by talking about that the severance of Islamic thought and Islamic methodology, right? That severance between the two, and the severance also of a collective mindset with the ummah, right, as a civilization. And then he continues on by saying the need is to work towards reviving the ideologies of the ummah, to reinvigorate and gradually develop its methodology. So he seeks to get back to those methodological and epistemological roots of the ummah that were, if you will, originated from the ummah, right? And to slowly but surely reinvigorate and develop and redevelop its methodology, and elucidating its viewpoints and its intimate relationship with original Islamic goals, right? So that constitutes the questions: what are the goals of Islam, right? And then he continues by saying the need also is to work for adopting and incorporating a comprehensive Islamic methodology in the fields of social sciences and the humanities, foster and fund scientific studies, some more natural science studies in actual individual and social life conditions. Okay, so the goal here that he talks about is also collective funding, right? Being able to come together and to fund research, to fund inquiry, especially in regards to the disciplines that are focused on Islamic methodology and epistemology. Let's see. Yes. Okay. To continue here. goal number 6 says that the need is also to implement the requisite steps to allow the developing contemporary Islamic culture and methodology to avail themselves of the foundations of Islamic principles and legacy, right? So to be able to educate, um, to be able to educate the Muslims, especially Muslim scholarship, of the legacy of Islamic culture and methodology. So understanding its history, as well as of modern sciences and knowledge, by making them accessible and digestible to Muslim students. So in this sense, one of the goals that al-Faruqi had in regards to being able to educate Muslims was to be able to provide textbooks. This is why he says making the Islamic culture and methodology and principles and legacy accessible. When he talks about making it accessible, he's talking about providing digestible textbooks to undergraduate Muslim students, right, or to different institutions to educate kind of teenagers who are rising up into their academic career and things of that nature, right? He also talks about providing help in researching, studying, and working on the methodology and its presentation, with the view towards elucidating Islamic concepts and intellectual outlook. So again, providing the space for scholars to come to this institution, to dedicate their time and their energy to research, whether it be on their they have vacations or they have sabbatical leaves, I believe it's called, where there's an extended period of time where they can just solely focus on just research and deepening their understanding of the Islamic tradition, epistemology, as well as culture and the legacy of early Muslims. Okay, so in regards to praxis, praxis meaning the approach of act that Faruqi theorizes in his work, is to mobilize thinkers and scholars alike who are specialized in the academic field as well as traditional Islamic sciences to engage in research at the institution, potentially on, like I said, sabbatical leaves or extended times off that they have, so they can focus on study and in-depth engagement with texts, be they traditional or be they modern academic texts in the fields of social sciences and things like that, like we've discussed, right? And then he also talks about, on top of this, the crystallization of thought and the reform of methodology. And this reform constitutes a study of the contents of Islamic thought and methodology as we know them today, and a need to present them with their basic issues, recast into a perfect integrated form, with the new ability to relate to 20th century at the time and now 21st century issues, right? So understanding and digesting the contents of Islamic thought and inquiry and methodology, and then kind of recasting them into the different disciplines and different forms to relate to the issues of today, right? To make it very practical and pragmatic, so to speak. But this would require a lot of scholarship and expertise. Faruqi says that it requires that we master the fundamental principles of Islam in the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet, ﷺ, as well as the related sciences of Sharia, right? Be they, usul al-fiqh, the disciplines of fiqh and theology, right? Things of that nature. In the Arabic languages, there's a lot of sub-disciplines in the Arabic language, from like grammar and into morphology and then rhetoric and things like that. As well as the early history of Islam, the early history of the Islamic civilization, right? So a thorough understanding of the problems of the present age as well is also required, right? To be able to understand the problems of the present age, to be able to understand the roots of those problems, right? As well as the different sources that critique those problems of the present age, right? So it does demand a lot, right? It does demand a lot of a good amount of scholarship and time and energy and effort, and that's why this institution is here to give scholars a space to be able to engage with the different texts that are needed for them to deepen their understanding of the tradition as well as the modern time. So um, it will be a crime if I didn't bring any type of critiques to the table, just to give us some food for thought. Lebanese sociologist Sadi Hanafi, he says that the Islamization of knowledge initiative responds to Eurocentrism with Islamocentrism and can potentially reduce Western values to simply that of Judeo-Christian. So it's very interesting here that, like I had said earlier, al-Faruqi comes to the table with in his introduction to his book, The Islamization of Knowledge, which is a theoretical kind of manual of praxis about this theory that he has. He comes to the table with a lot of lamentation, with a lot of, if you will, I guess I should say, kind of pointing the blame a little bit and lamenting about the Western, kind of this Western imposition in various forms, from knowledge to military to economic to social to political to cultural and things of that nature, right? But what Hanafi is saying here is that he's kind of fighting fire with fire, so to speak, and reducing Western values to simply that of Judeo-Christian, in the sense that he's saying he's kind of creating this binary of the West and the East, right? To where like this everything, any type of knowledge that is produced from Western institutions or Western scholarship is inherently anti, or not anti, but it's inherently not it's not something that we can accept or that we can engage with, right? In a way that we can claim it to be something that can be of value for Muslims, right? Continuing on, a famous, well-known sociologist, Sayyid Farid al-Attas, which is actually the nephew of, I'm sorry, he is the nephew of Muhammad Naqib al-Attas, which is a Malaysian, kind of a Malaysian counterpart to Faruqi. So al-Attas and Naqib al-Attas, they're related by blood, but their approach to Islam and knowledge is completely different, night and day difference. Farid al-Attas says that the goal of inquiry, the goal of seeking knowledge, the goal of understanding the world around us should not be to impose our own value system in or our own modes of thought onto that of another group or discipline, right? Thereby monopolizing the production of knowledge. Islam has a place in each field, but we should seek to understand things as they are, rather than what we think they should be, right? So he kind of takes he takes an approach of, understanding not from a normative point of view, right, but understanding for the sake of being able to understand. And he actually cites different examples of this. For example, there's a famous Islamic scholar called al-Biruni, and he wrote a famous book called Kitab al-Hind, which is like the book of, of what constitutes Hind, not Hinduism, but Hind meaning India. That's what India is called. That's what India is called by Arabs, Hind, right? So he wrote this book, Kitab al-Hind, which was very empirical, sociological, anthropological, so to speak, but not in no sense does he ever impose what he thinks that they should be doing or critique them for what they are doing. He just simply lays out their affairs, their approaches, the things that they're doing, what he sees, and he also learned the indigenous language to ensure that anything that um, he cites or that he writes is to the utmost possibility from the perspective of those people who he is studying, right? So it's not from a place of like, you know, it's not from a place of like, trying to impose um, his own vocabulary, his own academic vocabulary onto them, but he's even learning the vocabulary of the Indians of that time. He's learning their vocabulary, learning their ways of speaking, of thinking, of thought, and writing about it from their own perspective, right? So he says that we should seek to understand things as they are, right? Not for the sake of kind of adopting it into an Islamic framework, so to speak, but rather from a perspective of simply just trying to understand for the sake of understanding, right? Yes. So this is specific to the field of social sciences, but this can be applied to a wide array of disciplines, right? Yes. So in the in this example, give me one second. Okay. My apologies. An example of implementation that I wanted to share was that of a scholar called Masood Adam Chaudhry. He is a Southeast Asian expert in finance, political economy, and banking. He received his PhD um, from a Western institution, and he also held the chair of finance I believe, in Canada for a major academic institution. Received his PhD. So he authored a work called "The Principles of Islamic Political Economy," and what he did in that work was very interesting. He establishes an epistemological foundation on Tawheed. So he says that the foundation of, if I can find the direct quote, yes, he said that the foundational epistemological foundation of the economy should be predicated upon Tawheed. But what's interesting is that he also acknowledges the necessity of interactive, integrative, and evolutionary processes that are based upon dialogue, as well as engagement with other forms of thought and epistemology, in order to, in a way, dismiss the tensions that may arise through competing forms of inquiry and understanding. So he does firmly believe that the foundation of the Islamic political economy is predicated upon oneness of Allah and Tawheed, but he also understands the importance of being able to engage and to take different forms of knowledge, or different modes and methods of reaching knowledge, in order to give commentary upon the most ethical, value-based approach in specifically this discipline of economics, right? And I think this is interesting because although the basis and the method is formulated upon a purely Islamic concept, he still does see the value, kind of in a Maqasidi approach. He still does see the value of adopting from different modes of epistemology and methodology. So I just wanted to just share this one example of an individual who does take this foundation approach. And as a matter of fact, he does actually work at he currently works at the International Islamic University of Malaysia, which is the counterpart of the International Islamic Institution of Thought in Washington, D.C. So he produces textbooks, he produces works, he teaches there, and he teaches these primarily Muslim students. He teaches these primarily Muslim students at this university, right? But he also exposes them to different forms of thinking, different forms of thought, different forms of understanding the world around them, in order for them to be as dynamic and well-informed as possible whenever they step out into academic positions or political positions, things of that, positions of policy. So I believe this is a good example of implementation that's not too focused, or that's not solely focused on the idealism and the ideal of the ethics and value-based system of Islam, but also not too kind of dismissive of Islam in an academic discipline as well. So for my final thoughts, I believe that the importance of the Islamization of knowledge and its approach is stemmed upon, first and foremost, understanding our tradition, right? Understanding our way of thinking as Muslims, and our way of understanding the world around us, especially from the idea of the origin of everything being from God, right? The unity of God's creation, right? The interdependency that we all have upon each other. I believe that these are important foundational bases for anyone, academic or not. This is an important foundation for anyone, any Muslim, whether or not you're working in a capacity where you're doing a lot of theorizing or thinking and things like that, right? But one thing that I would say is that I believe that this foundational understanding of our tradition should not lead us to adopting this binary of East versus West, especially in the globalized world that we live in today, whether we like it or not. There's so many valuable ideas and theories and systems of thought that have been produced from various different intellectuals at various different times throughout the modern intellectual era that we should benefit from, and we should seek to understand and potentially even apply if it aligns with our system of values and ethics as Muslims. So I don't think that we should be so dismissive of what Western forms of thought have provided humanity in the modern world. One example that I like to give, well, actually, even one example that Sayyid Farid al-Atlas gives is that of Marxism, right? You can say there are a lot of things that are problematic from Marx, but also a lot of beneficial things to take. For example, the idea of his critique on capitalism. It's in depth. It is probably the most expansive critique out there in the academy. And the efforts and the praxis of Marxists led to things that we sometimes really don't even think about. For example, Social Security, the 2-day work weekend. Before then, people were working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Understanding the importance of class relations in comparison to other social relations. Of course, there are some negative things that were brought about from the ideas of Marxism, but there are benefits like those that I just stated. So I don't think we should stay away from, you know, different forms of thoughts and understanding the world. It can only add to our understanding and never take away from it. So continuing on, I think that it's important to acknowledge the fact that indigenous ideas, traditions, and forms of thought hold value in a variety of the contexts, right? So, you know, there's plenty of examples of different thoughts or different forms of understanding and different academic theories that have been brought up in one context and have tried to been applied in a different context and have not worked at all, right? So it's important to understand that when we're seeking to engage with different disciplines as well as different theories, it's important to understand them for what they are from a historical perspective and how they're implied or imposed in their own context in comparison to another context. The most important thing that I would say to close is we should, as Muslims, whether or not we are academics or we are people of knowledge or just day-to-day individuals who are just trying to get by, regardless, it is important to hold true to our Islamic values and ethics in forms of practice in day-to-day engagement. So being able to, being able to hold true and to exemplify and exonerate our principles as Muslims of respect, of justice, of fairness, right? Of compassion, right? This is the most important thing from a kind of a perspective of kind of practicality and pragmatism, holding true to these values, especially in the world that we find ourselves to be in today, where these values are slowly beginning to be stripped away from the masses of people. It's important to hold true and to hold firm to these values and ethics in order for us to be able to provide a better alternative in the future, inshallah. So with that, I close. Jazakumullah khair, and I'll open the door for any questions that anyone might have.
Yep. Jazakallah, brother Joshua. That was a really outstanding presentation, really thoughtful, really clear. So as you said, we'll open up the floor for questions. Just to keep it organized, if you have questions or comments, please use the raise hand feature or type the questions in and we'll take them in order.